Welcome back to JBM Sports Media and our early season projections. Today we're covering my favorite team, the New York Mets. Um, we'll see where I sit. Am I optimistic? Am I not? I don't know. Maybe I'm going to trash them a little more than usual, but I'll let Ben start this off. Ben, show us the lineup and we'll discuss our strengths and weaknesses of this team.
So yeah, there's a lot of new for this Mets calendar year, I would have to say, because if you look at the Mets roster last year, obviously they did when they had Alonso, Nimmo, we have new faces here in Queens, and that being Bo Bichette, Jorge Polanco, Luis Robert, Marcus Semien, and I think there's a lot of things to be excited about of this offense. Defensively, I'll say that could be the question marks. I mean, JV, if you want to talk about it and the concerns defensively, I think let the audience know.
Yeah, so listen, I think this offense is going to score a ton of runs. I really do, and as long as they're healthy, they should be okay. But obviously, when we speak about their defense, it's Bo Bichette and Jorge Polanco now manning positions that they've never really played before. And David Stearns had said that defense was the main priority. They wanted to shore up their defense, and he proved that when he got Marcus Semien, to play second base. I thought that was a good trade. They got rid of Brandon Nimmo. It was kind of like dead weight. And that started the revamp of this team. But now that you look at it, you're saying that Polanco's going to be your first baseman and Bichette's going to be your third baseman. Two guys have never really played that position before. That's where it's going to be tough, for your corner infield spots. But this offense should click. What are you going to get out of Luis Robert? Hopefully, you can get a full season out of him. If Marcus Semien can give you any type of offense, that'll be a plus because he's going to give you really good defense. The key to me is Francisco Alvarez. I think if Francisco Alvarez can stay healthy, and show some pop at the bottom of this lineup, I think that's going to be a real score for this Mets team. And I think that's going to be a real reason why they get as successful as they could get. And obviously you have Lindor and Soto rounding out the top of the lineup, two on-base, percentage monsters, that can really start innings and really induce big rallies. So we'll see what happens with this team as long as they stay healthy. And, obviously Brett Beatty's another one that's had a good spring too. I wanted to mention that. If this team could gel early, I think that'll be a good sign as well. And, barring any injury, they should score a lot of runs in 2026.
Yeah, listen, I think that's all fair points. I'll be honest with you. To mention, Lindor and Soto to start off this lineup, I mean, you can't have a bad lineup if you have those two guys start rounding out your 1-2, and then you have Bo Bichette behind them. Honestly, I think Soto's primed to have potentially maybe the best season of his career. I said, we'll see how that plays out, but I really think he's going to go off and he's going to have a monster season. I think he's a little more acclimated to Queens, given all the distractions last year that he went through. I think that's all behind him now, so I think he's going to be in a better position to have a better offensive season. I mean, if he starts 2026 how he finished 2025, we're in for the NL East is going to be in some trouble. But overall, I'm going to touch on the defensive aspect of it. I mean, yes, to everything Joe said is absolutely right. You got Bo Bichette playing third. He struggled a little bit at shortstop. So we're going to see how that's going to translate. Is it better off him at third, with his lack of range at short? I know he's got a little bit of not an arm issue, but he doesn't have the strongest arm in the league. And now you just moved him a little further away from first base. So we're going to see how that essentially plays out. I believe he's going to struggle just a little in the beginning of the season. People are going to go nuts. They're going to go haywire about it, and I think he's going to find his own. To the Jorge Polanco at first base, I'll be honest with you, I don't like it. When this signing happened, it was like, great, all right, we have our DH, and it's like, nah, he's going to be the starting first baseman. I'm like, what? No. I personally believe at some point, Brett Beatty and Jorge Polanco, that's going to swap. Beatty's going to end up being the first baseman. Barring injury or anything catastrophic, obviously they have Tyrone Taylor here being the right fielder. I think it's going to end up being Carson Benj. I think the three of us could probably agree with that. He's having a very solid spring. Beatty also played a little bit of right field and doesn't look awful. Offensively, he's having another back-to-back very good spring training. But if you guys remember last year, he started the year off very slow. That can't happen again. We essentially can't afford that because you're going to need Beatty at the start of the back end of this lineup to really produce. Now, the other side of it, Luis Robert and Marcus Semien, I think, to me, are the two X factors of this lineup for two different reasons. One, Robert needs to elevate his game back to what it used to be. We were not down in the dumps in Chicago anymore. Sorry, Louis. But that's just the reality of the situation. You're on a team with a formidable lineup that is going to be contending for a playoff spot. He has to find the form and the superstar potential that he did have a couple of years ago. So that has to be a thing. And if he does, Anything close to that and stays healthy and gives you elite defense in center field, he's going to be a real problem. The other thing with Marcus Semien is I don't need this guy to hit 40 home runs anymore. I don't need him to hit 30 home runs anymore. I need him to be a veteran presence for the younger guys on this roster and in this lineup and keep everybody together. Be the quarterback, be the quarterback B to Francisco Lindor in honing in this infield. And I think his veteran presence is going to do that, excuse me. What he's going to produce, if he gives me relatively, I mean, if he got hurt last year, but his projections, if he doesn't get hurt, if he can give you those type of numbers, maybe about a 20 to 25 home run guy, 85 to 90 RBIs, I could live with that with elite defense at second base. And to touch on what Joe said about Francisco Alvarez, realistically, if everything else is clicking and all cylinders are firing, anything you get out of Alvarez is just an added bonus, because I understand we have all been spoiled growing up with the Piazzas, the Posadas, the Mauers, the Posies, the Pudge Rodriguez's, all those big hitting catchers that we got to see growing up. And, we're used to that. The catching position has never been about offense like that. That's why it's so rare to see some of these big, formidable offensive catchers. I'm not saying I need Alvarez to do that. What I need him to do is manage this staff, play good defense, throw out runners. That's what I want you to do. Everything else that you could bring to the table offensively, that is just an added bonus. My biggest takeaway with Alvarez, though, stop swinging out of your shoes. Stop trying to make a moment happen when it doesn't need to. Just live. Play the game that you know. Do what got you here, because you were a formidable talent. You were one of the highest prospects in the league before you came up to this team. Do what got you here. Don't try to own the moment. Don't try to have it. Just let it come to you. Let the game come to you. Slow the game down, because he's still working at a pace where he's too excited. He wants to make something happen. And I love that. But he's got to hone it down and hone in his talent of what got him to the major leagues.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It's going to be fascinating to see how this lineup shapes up on the field in 2026. But now talking about the rotation and who's going to be on the mound for the Mets. JB, if you want to take this over and talk about your thoughts of this Mets rotation in 2026.
Listen, I've said for a while that Steve Cohen needed to go out and get a true number one. I felt like this team lacked the number one, and they got it with Freddie Peralta. I thought it was a great trade, to really solidify the top of the rotation. And obviously Nolan McLean and Clay Holmes to me are going to be just really good pieces behind Freddie Peralta, and that's going to be a lot of trouble for a lot of teams having to face these three guys. Obviously most series are 3-game series, because you imagine Peralta, McLean, and Holmes that you have to face, in a 3-game series. That's a pretty decent top end of the rotation. Obviously, the question marks for me are 4, 5, and 6. Right, Sean Manaea, what are you going to get out of him? He was injury prone last year. What can he give you? At least 25 starts. To me, if he can give you 25 to 26 starts, that'll be a win. Is he going to maintain that 4 spot? We'll see. David Peterson, to me, has been a proven left-handed pitcher for this Met rotation. I think he's been solid. I think he's been more reliable when it comes to being able to give you a start every 5 days. So, maybe that shifts Manaea back to the pen if they wanted to go a 5-man rotation and maybe ease Manaea in a little bit more. Or do they go Senga to the pen if they wanted to go a 5-man and maybe ease him in a little bit more? Who knows? But I think Senga will be in this rotation. He was one of the best pitchers in baseball last year before he got hurt. So, you hope that he could come back to his form. And if he could stay at the bottom of that rotation, that's really formidable. Could you imagine him at the bottom of a rotation? That's pretty crazy. And then to round it back up to go to Freddie and Nolan is pretty wild to me. So this rotation could really have, some upside, but there are definitely some question marks rolling into 2026.
Joe, I really think you hit just about every nail that I want to cover as well, and I'm gonna try to add to it as best as I can. Now, reality was the Mets needed a bulldog. They needed an ace. That was obvious, blatantly obvious with the way that we saw the rotation fall apart last year due to injury and guys just essentially running out of gas, and that's what happened. David Peterson was part of that. I think he's going to bounce back, David Peterson, from that. I think he's obviously grown. He's experienced more innings. He threw more innings last year than he ever did. So it's only going to make him stronger going into 2026. And let's face the fact, David Peterson is coming into a contract year. Guys tend to perform during those times. So we'll see how that plays out. But to touch on Peralta, he was one of 2 guys that I wanted the Mets to go get. And it was a 1A, 1B type of situation. I led more to going after Joe Ryan. That was who I wanted. And the only reason that separated the two was that Joe Ryan had more team control. Freddie Peralta is essentially under a 1-year contract right now. Hopefully they get a deal done, and hopefully he stays a Met for the rest of his career. That would be fantastic. But reality, Met fans out there that don't really watch Milwaukee baseball unless we play each other, what you don't know about Freddie Peralta, he is a bulldog. He gives it 110% every start. He leaves it all out on the field. He's a phenomenal teammate. He's phenomenal in the clubhouse. He brings such a great vibe to any staff that he's going to be a part of. So I think the addition of him, the X factors, the stuff that the stat sheet doesn't cover, what he brings to the table is going to be massive for a lot of these guys in this rotation, especially some of the younger guys. Now, to get on to that, Nolan McLean. Could he have aced this staff if the Mets didn't go out getting Peralta? Probably could. But do you really want to put that pressure on such a young kid? For those of you that are basing all of your opinions on Nolan McLean based on what you saw in the WBC, I think that's foolish, in my opinion. And that tells me that you have never watched this kid pitch, and that's a real shame. You're going to start, though, because this kid, his stuff is electric and elite. Just watch him. Just watch him. Don't get that WBC stuff out of your head. It happens. It happens. This kid is the real deal. His stuff is amazing. I can't wait to see what he's going to do in a full season. And I think a 1-2 punch of him and Peralta is going to be absolutely filthy. To say that Clay Holmes, and I'm glad that Joe said it first, to say that Clay Holmes is a formidable number 3 at this point is music to my ears, because every Yankee fan was tearing me apart last year when the Mets went out and signed Clay Holmes, cardiac Clay, and made him a starter. Well, if you guys remember, the second to last game of the season, Clay Holmes took the ball, gave you 6 innings of no runs, and the Mets were in it, and Clay Holmes had a lot to do with it. Clay Holmes was one of the more consistent pitchers last year, and I got a ton of shit from every Yankee fan when I was so optimistic that Clay Holmes was going to translate to a starter. Well, guess what? He did. He's got innings under his belt now, and I think he's going to be able to go further into games and going to be, obviously better than he was last year. So I'm very excited to see him. My biggest question mark here, who hasn't looked good so far this spring training, Sean Manaea. Where are you? Where is the guy that we brought in the first year? Because the guy that we signed to that $75 million contract, you have not been him. I understand you've had injuries, and last year you look like a complete shell of yourself. You look like the version of you that got sent to the bullpen when you were in San Francisco. I don't know what's happening. If there's a guy that needs to find it, it's him. It is absolutely him. He could be a huge catalyst to this rotation going down the stretch with Manaea and what he accomplished just 2 years ago in that playoff run. Philadelphia was adjusting their pitching machine to get used to what Manaea brought, and he locked them down. He's got to find at least a piece of what he was 2 years ago. That could be huge. David Peterson, I touched on him already. I think he's going to be fantastic. I think now that he's got more innings under his belt, he's going to be able to go longer out the season and not run out of gas. Guys, don't forget, he was an all-star last year. And as far as Kodai Senga, stay healthy. Please, for the love of God, stay healthy. I have been such a Kodai Senga supporter that I'm still hanging on by a thread. I need you to stay healthy, because when you're healthy, you are one of the best pitchers in the league. And not a lot of people realize that. Like Joe said, he was one of the best the first 2 months of the season. And then Pete Alonso overthrew a ball. He screwed up his hamstring, and that was all she wrote for the season. He even went down to the minor leagues, if you guys don't remember. Kodai Senga, if you could have him at the back end of the rotation, potentially pitching like he was the first 2 months of last season, this rotation has potential to be absolutely lethal.
Yeah, I think the addition of Freddie Peralta was massive, and I think you're going to see it as he's just a consistent workhorse and just his work ethic and the clubhouse presence. And I think it's going to be a major plus having a guy like that, and maybe an extension does take place. But yeah, I think there's some bright spots, still some question marks in this rotation. Obviously, Manaea, Peterson, how is he going to perform in a contract year? Clay Holmes, could he do it again? Could he be consistent another year? And if that's the case, then yeah, obviously this Mets rotation has a lot of bright spots. But Kodai Senga, that's one I'm looking at. I think he's the biggest X factor, because if he can stay healthy, that's, like Mike said, that could be a lethal rotation potentially. But now let's get into talk about the Mets bullpen in 2026. And this is where a lot of people are all like, this is where this might be a little bit concerning a little bit. I'll be honest. JV, if you want to touch on it real quick.
Listen, I will say there are some bright spots. Obviously, Luke Weaver is a better bridge than they've had, in a while. And I'm a little shocked to not see AJ Minter on this list. Is he going to be hurt to start the season?
I don't think he's starting off the year.
Okay. So if they do eventually get him back healthy, that's a nice another lefty to have. And I think if they added a third lefty in Minter along with Brooks Raley and Brian Hudson there, that's a nice little piece to have, just to be able to mix and match in late innings against lefties and whatever case may have you. But to me, the question mark, right, is going to be Luke Weaver and Devin Williams. Can Luke Weaver stay healthy and can he be consistent? Because we have seen him as a Yankee fan. I've seen him in late innings. I know there was an injury last year that may have gotten him, pushed back a little too early, and he came back and he wasn't himself. But he does tend to leave his fastball up in the zone a little bit too much without some movement, and he could find himself, giving up a little bit too many home runs more than he should be. Devin Williams, the same thing. Can he find himself with his fastball to set up that lethal changeup and not get into counts where he becomes a little too predictable and he gets himself into some trouble? That's going to be the key. And then, like I said, if they can bring Minter back into the pen, that'll be a nice piece to have as a lefty. Can Brazaban be, a solid piece in the middle of this bullpen? Luis Garcia, can he give you some solid outs? These are all question marks to me. I think it's Tobias Myers was a nice little piece that they got in the trade, that included Peralta as well. But there are some question marks in this bullpen that I think, after the fifth or sixth inning, if there's a team that got to this Mets bullpen, I think the Mets are going to become a little bit more vulnerable later in innings in 2026.
I think that could be the case. Now, to touch on what you said, the two question marks realistically, Luke Weaver and Devin Williams. Totally understand that to a minimum degree, to an extent. Luke Weaver, I think he came back too early last year overall. I really think that was the case. And I don't blame him for that because if you're a gamer, you want to be on the field. And if you're giving 85%, you feel your 85% is better than most guys 100%. So I could see both sides of that coin, but then you have to also take a hard look in the mirror. If you're hurting the team, what good are you? So right. I think that's behind us. I think Luke Weaver has shown that, listen, he was a failed starter that's turned into a reliever, that he's taken on that role, and he's been fantastic so far, outside of a little blip last year. Devin Williams, on the other hand, I understand the hate that comes out of the Yankee fan, but I'm going to be honest with you. Most people have very short-term memory because two reasons. One, Devin Williams has been one of the best relievers baseball has seen for the last 4 or 5 years. He had one bad half a season, and now that has defined him. I think that is utterly ridiculous. He gave up a home run in a playoff game to Pete Alonso, and he had a bad first half season with the Yankees. And now all of a sudden, this guy is a scrub. But again, this just proves my point that most people don't watch Milwaukee baseball because this guy was elite. He was elite leading up to that. When the Yankees got him, they're celebrating. Okay, he had one bad half a season. Now he's a scrub. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. Time will tell. And
it was too much inconsistency though throughout the whole season. It was just
listen,
and then the fact with him was Boone was putting him in spots where he could succeed. The 6th inning, the 7th inning, that really got his season back on track. But he's not a 6th or a 7th inning guy. That's the problem. He has to be in the 9th inning, pitching in big spots and getting big outs. And the Yankees kind of wasted him throughout the season to try to get him back to where he was. And that, not to say waste, but they had to fix him in some way to get his confidence back up. And that's really where it was kind of, blinding a lot of people where, he was having a good second half. He was having a good second half because he maybe was in a game that was 5-0 in the 6th inning. And, the Yankees were maybe trailing or up big. And he was in spots that really didn't have big time pressure moments attached to them. So that's the one thing I think he's going to be more consistent in, where he's pitching more in the 9th inning as opposed to the 6th or the 7th.
Well, I could say this. I will thank the Yankees for getting his bullshit acclimating to New York out of the way so he can come over to the Mets and be a lot better. So, guys, thank you for that. And what I also mentioned about short-term memory, Edwin Diaz, that we're all crying about. All Mets fans are crying that he's gone and X, Y, and Z. Do you remember when we traded for him and everybody flipped out, number one? Number two, he was atrocious. You think Devin Williams was bad last year? Go look at Edwin Diaz's numbers his first year in New York and how much worse they were. There was no find the spot for Edwin Diaz. He was atrocious in every spot you put him in. He was terrible. Met fans were running him out of town. And now we're upset and crying that he's gone. He was worse than Devin Williams last year. So I'm just going to refresh everybody's memory. I don't think last season defined who Devin Williams is. I think he's going to be fine. to quickly get through the rest of the bullpen. I think we're actually going to see a piece of Craig Kimbrell at some point. Everybody forgets that the Mets have him.
Yeah, that's right.
He's breaking his ass to try to make this team. I think we're going to see him at some point. He's going to be in obviously lower situations. He's not the guy he once was. AJ Minter, you bring him back into this situation. You have AJ Minter and Luke Weaver as the 8th and 7th inning guy. And if Devin Williams returns to form, I've mentioned this about other teams. We're looking at a potential where you're shortening this game down to 6 innings. And then you have Freddie Peralta and Nolan McLean and these other guys that could eat some innings. Brazoban was phenomenal last year, then got overworked and kind of lost it. And I think one of the X factors to this bullpen is going to be Tobias Myers. I think he's going to be very good, and he's going to come up big in some big spots for this team. I like this acquisition. I thought that was a nice little throw-in that David Stearns might have plucked away from Milwaukee. So Tobias Myers could be a real X factor in this bullpen.
Yeah, I think there's good and there's obviously questions. I think Brian Hudson, that's one that he got cut from the Brewers for a reason. He had no control. At some point, he looked like he was out there jobbing. Luis Garcia, too. I mean, the fact that he's kind of in this middle relief spot, he was out there jobbing last year as well. Tobias Myers, I think he still has the potential, but there's a reason he was getting sent down to AAA from the Brewers, and that's because he was having a problem with command and control. Maybe it could change with the Mets. I don't know, but I do still have somewhat belief in him, but I just felt like he was just out there losing his command way too quickly. Brazoban, obviously he got overworked at the end of the year. Can he do it again? Another phenomenal year before he got overworked. We'll see. Brooks Raley, that's going to be an interesting name, I'll say, if he is in here for the 6th or 7th inning. Luke Weaver, I think he could be decent. I really do think he could be decent. It just depends how, has that hamstring fully recovered. I mean, that stuff like that tends to linger eventually, and you never know when it comes back or if it doesn't. I do like Devin Williams. I think he'll still be decent. He's already acclimated to the New York scene. So, I mean, look, there's question marks here. And obviously, if I could be honest, this is probably like their biggest question mark when it comes to their rotation and lineup. You could say this is the biggest part where they do have question marks. So we'll just see how that goes. But now it's finally time to talk about the over-under win total for the Mets in 2026. And FanDuel, please sponsor us, like I said, because the over-under fan is 90.5. This is JV, I'll let you go first. Mike goes last. I'll go after JV, and then Mike goes and finish it off.
All right, I'm gonna go. This is tough, but I'm a little surprised, to be honest with you. But I'm gonna go under. I'm gonna go 88-74. The New York Mets for 2026. I just think right now at the bottom of that rotation, how this lineup gels together, with their corner defense spots being a little bit of a problem. Is health going to be an issue? I'm going to throw all these things out. It's a long season. I know that. Can the bullpen be consistent? I just think they're a shade under 90 wins. I'm going to say 88-74 for the New York Mets.
You know what? I'm taking the under as well, but I'm going 88 wins as well. You took it right out of me right there. Pause. I think that when you look at the Mets this year, I will say there are bright spots, and there's going to be X factors that I think are going to show up, like Luis Robert Jr., maybe even Devin Williams. We'll see him back to his Milwaukee form. But there are, in my opinion, it's like Lindor. How long is it going to take for him to get fully acclimated from the hammy injury? Like, it takes a little bit so you could get everything intact and get your feet underneath you again. Kodai Senga, everything. I think as long as he's healthy, that's an amazing thing. Sean Manaea, I think he should go to the pen, to be honest with you. I mean, Ro talked about a little bit how he's been doing in spring training. It's not good. It's not good. I got to be honest with you. And the bullpen, they have concerns, but overall, I still see this being a playoff team, and I think 88 wins is going to do it. So, man, they need to make the playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs with this team, Mendoza's 40-ounce bounce. That's all I got to say about that.
Stearns may be on the hot seat too. He assembled this whole team.
Man, I don't even know what to tell you at that point. But yes, I think they're on the hot team. And I'm going 88 wins, just the under. I don't even know why it's at 90.5. I feel like that's like FanDuel. I don't know. Everything or a lot has to go right, and they don't take into account like the long season aspect of it. Because unfortunately, God forbid, but injuries happen, bro. Everybody goes through it. Every team goes through it. You saw the Astros last year, the Mets last year, even the Brewers last year, even to an extent. Because we had a lot of injuries, but we persevered through it. But yeah, I'm gonna go under 88.5. lock it in under 88.5 for me. I mean 88, but I don't know. I feel like this line, they didn't do the Mets justice with this line. I don't like it.
Listen, I understand both of your points. I'm going to go against the both of you. I'm taking the over. Why not? Go with the gusto. I think this lineup is going to hit. I think this rotation is going to be fairly solid. I think everything to both of you guys said, the big question mark could be the bullpen. You're also going to see at some point, obviously, the deadline is going to determine what they're going to do based on team needs, and the Mets are going to be active. I'm not completely sold on the rest of the NL East. I know there was a bunch of episodes I missed that, doing projections of the rest of the NL East that I wasn't there for, but I'm not sold on everybody. I'm not, big on the Braves. You guys obviously saw that episode. If you haven't, go check that out. Somebody's got to do it. And you know what? I don't think Philly is as strong as advertised. So I could see this team winning over 90 games. So I'm going to call it 92-70. I think they're just going to get over there. I think they're going to compete for the division. I think they're going to at least be in it a lot further than they were, closer to the end of this year. And I think 92 wins obviously gets you into the playoffs. I mean, if they won 92 last year, they would have made it if I'm not mistaken. So I could see this team absolutely winning over 90 games if everything goes right. And if most of these guys stay healthy and some of these projections and some of the thoughts that we had come to fruition. And I think that's, it's not really the tallest task to ask for. Realistically, everything that went wrong last year has a lot to do with injuries that not a lot of people want to, really take credit for. I know they didn't address the rotation last year, but, if you really think about it, the guys that were performing, they had injuries all throughout the year. And I don't know, is that really going to happen again? I'll tell you this, though. I think you guys are 1,000% right. If this team does not make the playoffs for the second year in a row, we're going to have I think Cohen is going to flip out. And I think he's going to clean house as far as the coaching staff goes and everything else. I think he's going to completely clean house, even though they kind of already did. I really think that could be a thing. How much of a leash are you going to give David Stearns if now the second year in a row he's put together another team and it does not make the playoffs? That's going to be unacceptable. That's not going to play. That's not going to play with Mr. Cohen, and I think he's going to freak out if that's the case. Guys, any final thoughts before we end this?
No, I think we all made great points about it, and I think we're all hopeful that they have a fully healthy, intact year. And I think if that's the case, the upside for the Mets could be big time.
Yeah, listen, I think it's definitely a revamped squad from top to bottom, and even the bullpen. I think that they're definitely going to contend a lot better than they did last year. I just think that they have to be consistent. They have to be consistent. Forget injuries. If they're not consistent, that's going to shoot themselves in the foot. And they need that bottom of that rotation to be somewhat formidable, and they need the bullpen to really come in and do what they're supposed to do on a daily basis. So if that happens, they'll be okay. If not, it could be a long season.
Yeah. Listen, guys, I have given you my over thoughts with this team. I know I did a lot of talking in this episode, but you know what? This is the team I root for, so I think it kind of makes sense. So if you guys are still here, we do appreciate you guys for staying, sticking throughout this entire episode. Now this is your chance. We're going to open up the floor to you guys. Light up that comment section. Let us know where I'm at my craziest, where I'm at my wit's end. Do you agree with everything I said, Joe said, Ben said, or do you find yourself something in the middle? Is there a guy that we really didn't touch on that you wanted to hear more from? Light us up in the comments. Give us your thoughts on the matter. We would love to hear it. And guys, as always, thanks for hanging out with us.